The Council's last hope. The emergency session bells echoed through the crystalline halls of the Galactic Federation headquarters. Council Prime Zephyr's translucent wings flickered with nervous energy as representatives from 47 star systems gathered in the Great Chamber. The Etherian leader had called this meeting with one purpose: to find a solution to their impending extinction. The Vorthok Empire had been unstoppable for 18 months. Their biomechanical warships consumed everything in their path, turning conquered worlds into breeding grounds for their expanding fleet. Traditional Federation tactics had failed spectacularly. Every engagement resulted in devastating losses, while the enemy grew stronger. Ambassador David Kane walked through the massive doors, his human form dwarfed by the towering aliens around him. Earth had joined the Federation only 5 years ago, and humanity was still considered a primitive species by most council members. Kane's black diplomatic uniform stood out among the colorful robes and natural coverings of the other representatives. The chamber fell silent as Kane took his assigned seat in the newest section. The human delegation consisted of just 3 people, a stark contrast to the dozens of representatives from older civilizations. Kane could feel hundreds of alien eyes watching him, many filled with barely concealed contempt. Council Prime Zephyr rose to address the assembly. Her voice carried the musical quality of her species, but the words were heavy with despair. Representatives of the Federation, we face our darkest hour. The Vorthok have taken another 7 systems this week. Our combined fleets cannot match their adaptive technology and biological weapons. Admiral Thane of the Draconian Republic stood up, his reptilian scales shifting from green to deep red. Kane had learned that this color change indicated extreme stress or anger. Our losses are catastrophic, Thane reported. The enemy's bioships learn from each battle. They adapt their defenses faster than we can modify our attacks. Their neural parasites have turned thousands of our own soldiers against us. Murmurs of fear rippled through the chamber. The crystalline Zephyrians created sounds like distant thunder. The aquatic Nereians bubbled anxiously in their water-filled environment suits. Kane had attended many of these emergency sessions, but this felt different. This felt final. Senator Crowell of the Orcanian worlds slammed his massive fist on his desk. We need new strategies, new weapons, new tactics. Everything we have tried has failed against these monsters. Zephyr's wings darkened to a deep blue, indicating profound sadness. The Science Council has exhausted all conventional options. Our greatest minds have studied Vorthok technology for months without breakthrough. We are losing this war because they fight unlike anything we have ever encountered. The chamber erupted in desperate discussions. Representatives shouted suggestions in dozens of languages while the translation systems struggled to keep up. Kane listened to proposals for new alliances, experimental weapons, and desperate last stands. None of them would work against an enemy that adapted faster than they could innovate. Finally, Zephyr called for order. The chamber gradually fell silent as all eyes turned to the Etherian leader. There is one option we have not yet considered, she said reluctantly. The newest members of our Federation possess certain qualities that might prove useful in our current situation. Kane felt the weight of hundreds of alien gazers shift to the human section. He had been expecting this moment for weeks. The Federation always turned to its newest members when civilized solutions failed. Usually, they asked for resources or manufacturing support. This time, Kane suspected they wanted something more dangerous. Ambassador Kane, Zephyr said formally, your species has remained neutral in this conflict while developing your military capabilities. The Federation formally requests Earth's assistance in our defensive operations against the Vorthok Empire." Kane stood slowly, feeling the tension in the chamber rise with his movement. Every representative was waiting to hear humanity's response. The fate of 47 civilizations might depend on his next words. "Council Prime," Kane said, his voice steady despite the magnitude of the moment. "Humanity has indeed been studying this conflict. We have analyzed Vorthok tactics, technology, and strategic patterns. We have examined your defensive measures and battle records. We have learned everything we could about this war." Kane paused, letting his words settle over the assembly. The translation systems carried his voice to every species in their own language, but the meaning was universal. "The Federation asks if humanity will join your defensive efforts," Kane continued. "But with respect, Council Prime, you are asking the wrong question entirely." Confused sounds filled the chamber. Draconian scales shifted colors rapidly. Zephyrian wings flickered with uncertainty. The Nerians pressed against their suit walls in agitation. Admiral Thane rose to his full, impressive height. "What do you mean, human? Speak plainly." Kane took a deep breath. What he was about to say would either save the galaxy or destroy humanity's place in it forever. "You should not be asking if humanity will join your defense. You should be asking if you will accept humanity's leadership in this war." The chamber exploded into chaos. Angry shouts echoed from every section. Senator Krau's roar drowned out the Orcanian translation system. Several Draconian delegates stood and pointed accusingly at Kane. Even the normally serene Etherians were flashing bright warning colors. "This is outrageous," Admiral Thane bellowed above the noise. "Your species discovered faster than light. Travel barely 50 years ago. Your largest warship carries fewer weapons than our escort vessels. What could humanity possibly offer that our combined civilizations cannot provide?" Kane waited patiently for the uproar to subside. He had expected this reaction. These ancient civilizations could not imagine that a young species might possess something they lacked. "Admiral Thane is correct," Kane said when the chamber quieted. "Humanity's technology is primitive compared to yours. Our ships are slower, our weapons are weaker, and our defenses are basic by your standards." Kane looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of representatives from each major species. "But there is something the Federation forces lack. Something that no amount of advanced technology can replace. Something the Vorthok have never encountered before. And what might that be?" Zephyr asked, her voice barely concealing skepticism. Kane's expression hardened. "Desperation. You fight this war like civilized beings following ancient codes of honor. You worry about proper conduct and traditional tactics. You treat warfare like a formal dance between respectful enemies." The chamber fell completely silent. Kane could hear the background hum of life support systems and the distant sound of space traffic outside. "Humanity does not fight that way," Kane continued. "We evolved on a world where everything tried to kill us. Our weather, our predators, our diseases, even our plant life posed constant threats. We learned to survive by doing whatever it takes. We learned that there are no rules when your species faces extinction." Senator Vara of the Etherian Science Council stood gracefully. "You speak of abandoning civilized principles. Such barbarism is precisely what we seek to defend against. Civilized beings are losing this war," Kane replied bluntly. "Your principles mean nothing to the Vorthok. They consume entire populations and turn captured worlds into breeding facilities for their bioships. They do not respect your rules of engagement or your concepts of honor. Kane walked to the center of the chamber, taking the main podium usually reserved for Council Prime Zephyr. Every eye in the massive room followed his movement. The Federation has fought the Vorthok for 18 months using traditional methods, Kane said. You have conducted fleet battles in open space, protected civilian populations, and maintained careful rules of engagement. You have fought with honor and dignity. Kane's voice grew stronger, more forceful. In those 18 months, you have lost 38 star systems. The Vorthok Empire has grown more powerful with each victory. They adapt to your tactics because your tactics are predictable. You fight the way civilized species have always fought. Admiral Thane's scales had shifted to a color Kane had never seen before. What are you suggesting, human? I am suggesting that this war cannot be won through civilized means, Kane replied. The Vorthok have evolved beyond conventional warfare. They use biological weapons, neural control, and terror tactics. They turn your own people against you and corrupt entire worlds to serve their purposes. Kane's voice carried throughout the silent chamber. If you want to defeat such an enemy, you need soldiers who understand what it means to fight without limits. You need warriors who care more about winning than about maintaining their reputation for honor. Council Prime Zephyr's wings had gone, completely still, a sign of deep contemplation among her people. What exactly are you proposing, Ambassador Kane? Humanity offers to coordinate all Federation military operations under human strategic command. We will plan the campaigns, choose the tactics, and decide which battles to fight. We will determine what sacrifices are necessary for victory. The silence stretched for long moments. Kane could see the internal struggle on dozens of alien faces, as they weighed their pride against their fear. And what would you require from us in return? Zephyr asked quietly. Complete operational authority over all military assets, access to all intelligence regarding Vorthok capabilities, and a promise that you will not interfere with our methods, regardless of how disturbing you find them. Admiral Thane stepped forward, his massive form radiating anger. You ask us to surrender control of our fleets to a species that has never fought a space war. Humans have only experienced conflicts on your own world. Kane nodded calmly. That is true, Admiral. We have never fought in space before, but we have fought for survival against impossible odds for millions of years. We know how to defeat enemies that are bigger, stronger, and more advanced than we are. Kane looked directly at the Draconian Admiral. Your species evolved on a world with abundant resources and stable weather patterns. You developed technology to improve your comfort. Humanity evolved on a world that tried to kill us every single day. We developed technology to help us kill our enemies first. Kane turned back to address the entire assembly. The Vorthok have never faced an enemy that thinks like humans do. They have conquered species that fight with honor and follow ancient traditions. They have never fought a species that views war as simply another survival challenge to overcome. The debate continued for hours. Representatives argued about honor, principles, and the cost of abandoning their civilized values. Some species threatened to withdraw from the Federation entirely rather than accept human leadership. Others pointed out that their current path led only to extinction. Finally, Council Prime Zephyr called for a formal vote. The results were close. 24 systems voted to accept humanity's proposal. 23 voted against. The deciding vote came from the Etherian Council itself, swayed by fear of the alternative. The motion passes, Zephyr announced. Humanity will assume strategic command of all Federation military operations, effective immediately. Kane felt the weight of galactic history settling on his shoulders. Thank you for your trust, Council Prime. I will not disappoint you. 3 weeks later, Captain Lisa Morgan stood on the bridge of the UES Determination, humanity's newest and most advanced warship. The Federation had provided her with detailed intelligence about Vorthok tactics and technology. Now it was time to prove that human methods could succeed where alien strategies had failed. Status report: Commander Peterson. Morgan ordered her second-in-command. Vorthok biofleet detected in the Kepler 442 system, Peterson replied. 43. Primary vessels, estimated crew of 60,000. They are following standard consumption patterns, harvesting the fourth planet for biological material. Morgan studied the tactical display showing enemy positions. The Vorthok ships looked like enormous sea creatures crossed with mechanical nightmares. They pulsed with organic rhythms while bristling with weapon systems that grew and adapted during battle. What about our Federation observers? Morgan asked. Admiral Thane's task force is maintaining position at the designated coordinates. They have strict orders to observe only unless we specifically request assistance. Morgan smiled grimly. The alien allies wanted to see how humanity fought before committing their own forces. That suited her perfectly. She preferred working without interference from species that thought war should be polite. Lieutenant Hayes, status on the gravity mines. All devices deployed and armed. Captain Vorthok bioships will encounter them at the 3 most likely. Approach vectors. Morgan nodded. The Federation had never used weapons like these because they considered them too unpredictable. Human military doctrine embraced unpredictability as a tactical advantage. Incoming transmission on diplomatic channels, reported Communications Officer Torres. Put it through, Morgan ordered. The main screen displayed a Vorthok war leader, its form a disturbing blend of insect and machine. Cybernetic implants covered most of its head, while organic tentacles writhed where arms should be. I am Hive Mind Scareth of the Vorthok Empire, the creature announced. Its voice sounded like grinding metal mixed with organic screams. You will surrender your vessels and submit to neural integration. Resistance will only increase your suffering. Morgan stepped forward so the alien could see her clearly. This is Captain Lisa Morgan of the United Earth Fleet. You are in violation of Federation space. Withdraw immediately or face immediate destruction. Scareth's mechanical eyes focused on Morgan with interest. Humans, we have heard of your species. Primitive beings who fight with crude weapons on a single world. You cannot comprehend the power of the Vorthok Empire. I guess we'll find out, Morgan replied calmly. Morgan out. The communication ended, leaving the bridge quiet except for the steady hum of the ship's systems. Morgan turned to her crew, all of whom had volunteered for this mission, knowing they might not return home. All ships, this is Morgan. Execute Operation Chaos Storm on my mark. Remember, we are not here to fight fair. We are here to win. The first phase of the operation began immediately, but it was nothing like traditional space. Combat. Instead of meeting the Vorthok in formal battle lines, the human fleet scattered in all directions, fleeing at maximum speed. To the Federation observers, it looked like humanity was retreating before the battle even began. Morgan could imagine Admiral Thane's disgust at this apparent cowardice. The Vorthok were confused as well, pursuing the fleeing humans but unable to catch all the ships simultaneously. The biofleet split up to chase different targets. exactly as Morgan had hoped. Phase 2 began as human ships deployed equipment. They had hidden in their cargo holds sensor jammers, gravity well generators, and communication disruptors. Within minutes, the star system became a maze of electronic interference and artificial gravity fields. The Vorthok ships found themselves isolated from each other, unable to coordinate their neural attacks or maintain their hive mind connections. Phase 3 was the real battle, but it was unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. Human vessels led Vorthok ships through carefully prepared kill zones. They used the enemy's own adaptive nature against them, feeding false data to bioship sensors and causing their weapons to malfunction. The UES Retribution, commanded by Captain Rodriguez, faced a Vorthok biocruiser 3 times its size. Instead of engaging in direct combat, Rodriguez led the enemy ship through an asteroid field, where humans had placed nuclear charges. The explosions damaged the bioship's living hull and disrupted its sensory organs. While the Vorthok vessel tried to heal itself, Retribution launched a spread of missiles loaded with engineered viruses designed to attack biological systems. Captain Chen, commanding the EU's Vengeance, dealt with his opponent even more dramatically. When a Vorthok ship tried to use neural parasites on his crew, Chen activated his ship's self-destruct sequence and rammed the enemy vessel at full speed. The nuclear explosion destroyed both ships but eliminated one of the most dangerous enemies. In the Vorthok fleet, the battle ended after 4 hours. Every Vorthok vessel was destroyed. The human fleet had lost 6 ships and nearly 2,000 crew members. But they had achieved something the Federation had never managed: a complete victory with no enemy survivors. Morgan stood on her bridge, looking out at the debris field that had once been a Vorthok warfleet. Her communications officer was receiving urgent messages from the Federation observer ships, but she ignored them for now. Damage report, she ordered. Hull breaches on decks 5 and 7. Engineering reports, reactor efficiency at 70%. We'll need major repairs before the next engagement, Peterson replied. Casualty report: 38 dead, including Captain Chen and his entire crew, 112 wounded. Medical teams are working around the clock. Morgan nodded. Solemnly, the losses were heavy, but they were acceptable by human standards. In civilized warfare, such casualties would be considered a disaster. For humanity, they were the price of victory. Admiral Thane's image appeared on the communication screen, his reptilian features showing complete bewilderment. Captain Morgan, we must discuss what transpired during this engagement. What would you like to discuss, Admiral? We destroyed an entire Vorthok fleet with minimal losses. I'd call that a successful operation. You refused to accept surrender requests. You hunted down retreating enemies. You used weapons designed to cause maximum biological damage. These tactics violate every principle of civilized warfare. Morgan's expression hardened. Admiral, how many battles have you won against the Vorthok using civilized methods? Thane's scale shifted to a darker color. That is not the point. There are standards that separate us from barbarians. There are standards that help you feel good about losing, Morgan replied firmly. The Vorthok do not follow your rules. They consume prisoners and turn captured worlds into breeding facilities. Why should we show them mercy they have never demonstrated? The conversation continued for another hour, but Morgan could see that the alien was beginning to understand. He did not like humanity's methods, but he could not argue with the results. After Admiral Thane ended the communication, Morgan remained on her bridge, staring out at the stars. she knew word of this battle would spread quickly through both the Federation and the Vorthok Empire. But as celebration messages poured in from Federation worlds, deep space sensors detected something else entirely. In the void between galaxies, ancient objects were beginning to move. Things that had slept for millennia were stirring in response to the violence spreading across the galaxy. The war was about to change in ways no one could imagine. Asterisk shadows from the deep DR. James Parker knelt in the ancient ruins of Proxima Centauri 7, carefully excavating artifacts that had been buried for over 10,000 years. The archaeological site had been discovered only after humanity's recent victories against the Vorthok Empire, when expanding human patrols found evidence of a long-dead civilization. The stone tablets Parker was uncovering contained symbols unlike anything in Federation databases. The writing system was complex, combining pictographs with mathematical formulas that seemed to describe astronomical phenomena. But what disturbed Parker most were the recurring images of ships that appeared to be made of pure darkness. Professor Parker called his assistant, Dr. Sarah Kim. She was examining a wall carving on the other side of the excavation site. "I found something you need to see immediately." Parker stood up, his joints protesting after hours of delicate work. He was getting too old for field work, but this discovery was too important to leave to junior researchers. He walked over to where Kim was working, and what he saw made his blood run cold. The wall carving showed a detailed map of the galaxy, but with strange annotations around the edges. Dark shapes seemed to emerge from the void between stars, moving toward the galactic center at the bottom of the image. Text was carved in the ancient universal script that had been used by the first galactic civilizations. "Can you translate it?" Kim asked nervously. Parker nodded, his years of studying dead languages finally proving their worth. He read the inscription slowly, his voice growing quieter with each word. "When the fires of war burn bright enough to be seen across the cosmic dark, the void shepherds shall awaken from their eternal vigil. They who maintain the silence between stars will rise to restore the peace of emptiness." Kim stared at the carving with growing alarm. "That sounds like a prophecy about some kind of intervention force." "It's not a prophecy," Parker said grimly. "It's a historical record. And according to the dating on these artifacts, the last time this happened was exactly 10,000 years ago, right around the time every major galactic civilization mysteriously vanished." Parker's communicator buzzed with an urgent message. He activated the device and saw the face of Admiral Jackson, the human officer coordinating scientific research for the war effort. "Dr. Parker, return to Earth immediately. We have a crisis situation developing." "What kind of crisis?" Parker asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. "Our deep space monitoring stations are detecting massive objects moving through intergalactic space. Objects that don't show up on our sensors, except as areas where starlight simply disappears." Parker looked back at the wall carving, showing dark ships emerging from the void. "Admiral, I'm transmitting archaeological data that I believe is directly relevant to your situation. I strongly recommend implementing immediate defensive protocols and recalling all human fleets to fortified positions." "Why? What have you found?" "Evidence that we may have triggered an automatic response from something that has been dormant for 10 millennia. Something that views galactic warfare as a threat requiring immediate elimination." 72 hours later, Parker found himself in the Crisis Command Center beneath Geneva, surrounded by military officers and government officials. The wall screens showed tactical displays from across the galaxy. But instead of celebrating humanity's continued victories against the Vorthok, everyone was focused on the terrifying sensor readings from deep space. General Sarah Martinez, humanity's Supreme Military Commander, stood at the center of the room, pointing at displays that showed the impossible. "The objects are massive," she was saying. "Individual vessels appear to be larger than Jupiter, moving at significant fractions of light speed despite their size." Parker studied the sensor data with growing dread. The objects were arranged in a perfect sphere around the galaxy, approaching from all directions simultaneously. Their speed and coordination suggested an intelligence that could plan operations across intergalactic distances. General Parker interrupted, "May I share my archaeological findings with the command staff?" Martinez turned to look at the scientist. "Dr. Parker, we're dealing with an immediate military threat. Ancient history is not our priority right now. Actually, it's directly relevant to our survival," Parker replied firmly. He activated his datapad and projected images from his excavation onto the room's main screen. The assembled officers stared at ancient carvings, showing dark ships approaching a galaxy filled with warring civilizations. Parker pointed to specific symbols in the inscriptions. "Every extinct civilization I've studied mentions the same phenomenon," Parker explained. "They call them by different names: Void Shepherds, Dark Arbiters, the Silent Fleet, but they all describe the same thing: ships from intergalactic space that appear when galactic warfare reaches a critical threshold." Admiral Jackson leaned forward. "What kind of threshold?" "According to these records, 3 conditions must be met. First, the conflict must span multiple star systems simultaneously. Second, the warfare must involve weapons that attack biological life itself. Third, the combatants must abandon traditional limitations on violence." The room became very quiet as the implications sank in. General Martinez crossed her arms. "Our operations against the Vorthok meet all those criteria." "Exactly," Parker confirmed. "We've been fighting across dozens of systems using biological weapons and unrestricted tactics. We've essentially sent a signal across intergalactic space that another cycle of unlimited warfare has begun." The command center's communication systems suddenly activated without authorization. Every screen in the room displayed the same image: a figure that appeared to be made of living shadow, with features that seemed to shift and flow like liquid darkness. "I am the harbinger of the Black Armada," the entity said. Its voice sounded like the whisper of dying stars. "We have observed the renewal of destructive warfare in this galaxy. The pattern repeats as it has countless times before." General Martinez stepped forward. "Identify yourself and state your intentions." The Harbinger's form flickered slightly, as if existing partially in another dimension. "We are the guardians of galactic stability. When civilizations develop beyond the capacity for peaceful coexistence, we fulfill our ancient mandate. This galaxy will be returned to silence." Parker felt ice in his veins. "You're talking about extinction. Complete genocide of all sentient life. We speak of peace," the Harbinger replied. "The permanent peace that comes when aggressive species can no longer disturb the cosmic order. We have performed this service for millions of years across countless galaxies." Admiral Jackson grabbed the communication microphone. "This is Admiral Jackson of the United Earth Fleet. We were defending ourselves against an invading force. Our actions were justified by the threat we faced." "Justification is irrelevant," the Harbinger said. "The pattern of unlimited warfare has begun. It will spread across the galaxy as it always does, consuming all life in its path. We will prevent this outcome by eliminating all participants. The communication ended, leaving the command center in stunned silence. Parker looked around at the faces of Earth's military leadership and saw his own terror reflected in their expressions. "How long do we have?" General Martinez asked quietly. "According to the archaeological evidence, the Black Armada moves slowly, but inexorably. We probably have weeks, maybe months before they reach the inner galaxy. What about our weapons, our fleets?" Parker shook his head. "Every record I've found describes the same outcome. Advanced civilizations tried to fight the Armada and failed completely. Their technology was absorbed and turned against them. Entire species vanished without trace." Admiral Jackson pulled up fleet deployment charts. "We need to recall all our forces and coordinate with the Federation. This threat is bigger than our war with the Vorthok." The Vorthok General Martinez said suddenly, "They're facing the same extinction we are. For the first time in this war, we have a mutual interest in survival." Parker nodded slowly. The ancient records mentioned temporary alliances between warring species when the Armada appeared. None of them were successful in the long term, but they did slow the advance. "Then we try something that's never been tried before," Martinez said. "We unite every living civilization in the galaxy against this threat." The next few weeks were a whirlwind of desperate diplomacy and frantic preparation. Ambassador David Kane worked around the clock to build an alliance that included not just the Federation, but also the Vorthok Empire and dozens of neutral species that had avoided the war. The negotiations were unlike anything in galactic history. Former enemies who had been trying to exterminate each other suddenly found themselves planning joint operations. Vorthok biotechnology was combined with Federation energy weapons and human tactical innovation.